Hello, 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 everybody. It is your boy, Reverend Phoenix Coffin Williams. And of course, I'm coming to you from the chilly, the moist, the damp Buffalo, New York. It is Friday, May 23rd, 2025. And we heading into a long weekend. And I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty decently, feeling pretty high. Um, it will just be us today as Reverend Alyssa is not able to make it. But we do send her all of our love and all of our blessings. And we look forward to when we can get back together and have a conversation as a team. But for today, I wanted to talk about two. I wanted to talk about a few of the cards in the major arcana. Um, but I'm pulling them out right now. So once I have all three of them, I will introduce them. The first one is the Empress. Pow pow. The second one is the Emperor. Bow dow. Pow pow. And let's see. Pull up the chat. The third one is going to be the Hierophant. Shibbity bloop. So we got those three. As you know, if you are watching this, you can interact with me using the chat function on whatever platform you're viewing me on. So if you're on Facebook, talk to me on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, talk to me on YouTube. If you're on any of the other platforms where this is streaming, go ahead and give a comment and we can interact. But for today, I want to talk about this little triad right here. The Empress and her two consorts, the Emperor and the Hierophant. Now, one of the ways to understand the Empress is by viewing her as nature herself. Not just nature as in growing things, not just nature as in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, not just nature like you put a seed in the soil and you cover it with dirt and you water it and you give it sunlight and it grows. Not just that nature, although that is absolutely encoded in here, but also the nature of existence in general, our human nature, the nature that makes up our instincts to survive, our nature that makes up our instincts to thrive, our nature to seek things out that are pleasurable to us, our nature to avoid things that bring us pain or heartache or misery. Those are all encoded here in the Empress. And as a result, she also represents all of the goddesses of nature, goddesses of the sun, goddesses of Venus, goddesses of earth, goddesses of the moon. In her card, we see the water there, so also goddesses of the sea. All of these things are a part of nature, and all of them also make up our nature. And so, discussing this in two ways, we discuss it as our own personal identity, our nature, as first the macrocosm, in which when the Empress shows up, she helps us understand aspects of our own archetypal existence that can help us draw out power and understanding. But then when we make this card about the universe, our identities become the microcosm, and the planetary impacts and the natural impacts and the very nature of the universe is starting to be explored here. Of course, we consider the Empress as this divine feminine kind of energy. Perhaps it's a little bit receptive. However, that's not just it, because there's a lot of power and expanse that comes as a result of nature. One of the ways that you can think about this card is when it shows up is you can ask or ponder what exactly is the nature of the situation I'm asking about. Is the nature of a financial concern? Is it of an emotional or relational concern? Is it an identity concern? Either way, the Empress wants us to understand the role of pleasure and good things and the way that that liberates us from experiences that are not meant for us. Because as magical folks, as Corellians, acts of love and pleasure are our sacraments. And so the things that feel good, the things that are to our benefit, the things that uplift us and support us, they are not seen as problematic. They are not seen as things that threaten our souls. They are actually seen as things that help us understand divinity more. When it comes to her two consorts, the Emperor and the Hierophant, they represent two aspects of what we do to cope with nature. We go with society and we go with education. The Emperor represents what we did in nature. We went into nature and we built cities. We built metropolises. We built villages. We decided where farming was going to happen and where leisure was going to happen. The Emperor represents the human instinct to try to derive order out of nature. And this is why I discuss the Emperor as one of the consorts of the Empress. The Hierophant represents the education and all of the things that we try to learn and encode about nature and pass it on to others. Maybe attempting to form a tradition out of it, maybe in a way of kind of an early scientific exploration, right? If we write everything down and we do things the same way over and over and over again, perhaps we can get the same results. So these two energies, they kind of support and maintain each other. However, none of them are at all possible without the supreme goddess here who has put nature in all of us, in what we see and in what we experience. I'm going to go into more discussion about the Hierophant and the Emperor. Um, but I do want to make sure that I get the sponsors in. I want to make sure that we give credit to where credit is due. So I'm gonna check in with our first sponsor right here, and it is going to be, of course, Equinox. Thank you, Equinox Learning Hub. So back into it. When we have the Empress, excuse me, when we have the Empress and the Emperor, we can think about them for a second as 2 points on a pole, um, where these points are right here, but there are, of course, other points on the pole on the spectrum. The Empress represents immediate incarnation. nature unchecked, unbound, pleasure everywhere, motherly goodness everywhere, a warm reception everywhere. And then the emperor is all of the things that we do to bring nature under our control or dominion as people. Now, when we think about it on the microcosm, when we are considering the development of our personalities and our identities, the empress and the emperor, I keep getting these mixed up in my hands. The empress and the emperor, they immediately represent our mother and our father and the role that they play in helping us understand the world. For many of us, our mother is the one who provides most of all of our comfort, all of our food. Perhaps it's our mom who makes our plates every night or packs our lunches. It's our mom who, we see mom folding up our clothes and putting them away. It's our mom who's responsible for reminding us to get into the tub when we are children. And it is the emperor or our dad who is the one who enforces the rule of law or has the stricter communication or who has the more colder expectations without consideration for like what you might be feeling or what you might be going through. Mom might say, hey, I understand it hurts. Dad might be like, hey, don't really care if it hurts, it didn't kill you, get up. Those might be the two poles by which we come to understand the empress and the emperor. And the emperor really does enforce and reinforce that social order, that social expectation, what we ought to be doing in order to be a good citizen in the empire and what have you. And a lot of times we hear the voice of the emperor reflected in some automatic negative thoughts. We hear the voice of the emperor or our fathers echoed in disappointments or in some of the mean words that we use to motivate ourselves to try to do what we think is the right thing. That's not always the case for everyone, but a lot of times, very many people will be like, "No, my dad was the hard ass, and my mom was the one who kind of intervened and called for a little bit more discernment or a little bit more tenderness." Additionally, encoded in the Emperor card is the tremendous amount of discomfort that the emperor or our father figures are required to just put up with on a regular basis while they're in that position. So we see the emperor here on his throne, but it is a stone throne, not necessarily comfortable, like hemorrhoids for days, obviously. Stone backing on it. You see he's in armor. And in that kind of armor, like it was not easy to remove that to go to the bathroom. So it probably sinks in there. Um, Additionally, we see that this emperor does have a model kind of Ankh symbol there, and that symbolizes the key of life and death. And it does give a little bit of like threatening because we know that originally the key to life and death is a natural thing. Living and dying and rebirth is a natural thing. But here in the arm, in the hand of the emperor, it means that the rule of law will likely kill you if you don't fall in line. This is a part of our human story and about how we've come to be so domesticated and, metropolized. Let's see in the chat. Hello, Kayleen. Thanks for coming back for another week. Oh, it's 3 a.m. in Australia. It is early for you. And then, Kayleen, some of us may be adopted and thus have two mothers or fathers. Are there any variations to interpretation that would arise from consideration of that? I know both sets of mine. And so here's the thing, these cards, these decks were encoded to represent a certain aspect of history. So if you want to see or if you want to change these, you got to change them by yourself. You got to make it apply for yourself. But in this deck, the Empress and the Emperor stand for mother and father. If you yourself have two mothers, you have to decide which one was the rule of law, which one was the one who brought the hammer down, which one was the one who was responsible for accountability and meeting expectations, and which one did the most to nurture you and bring you pleasure and help you learn with a more understanding or gentle touch. You decide which ones they go with. But these cards were not designed, and the telling of these tales was not designed for anything outside of like what we say as heteronormative. If you want to see some queer stuff represented, grab a queer deck. And let's see. I do have a queer tarot, and it's called an inclusive deck and guidebook. And in here, you do see you do see these same symbols represented with different imagery or more queer affirming imagery. So that is absolutely an option. Great question. So where the Empress represents pleasure and nurturing and the abundance of nature and nature itself, the Emperor represents the rule of law, the rule of society, and the three of them together. And I know I didn't necessarily talk about the Hierophant all that much yet, but the three of them together, we could say represents the three different parts of our personality, the id, ego, and superego. And the superego being the one that has learned the lessons, has been able to work their way in and out of the world, has been able to gain a certain level of mastery, and can imply or um, use their various knowledge and coping techniques to help them maintain a certain kind of balance in the world. In this particular rendition of the Hierophant, we see the same pillars that we could say were the pillars from the High Priestess. We see two acolytes here who are wanting to learn and grow in the knowledge that will help them gain status. We see this little crown thingy here that does indicate status, and we see, the staff of rulership or leadership here with its various occult symbols. And then, interestingly enough, we see the crossed keys here in an upward position, which I attribute to St. Peter in the kingdoms of heaven. Um, when I see this symbol, it also reminds me of the concept of the world card. But the fact that this card is one of the consorts of the Empress, and the Empress, we could say, is primordial deity in, well, maybe, nope, not primordial deity, sorry, is primordial deity once it has split itself off. The Hierophant is interesting because we are led to believe that it's a dude figure, um the Pope in other decks, and it kind of continues this tradition of moving away from actual nature and more towards what we ourselves have established. So almost like a man-made nature here. And that is something that is also incorporate, like we have to understand that when we take a look at these cards in general, is we have goddess, and then we have all that we have done to leverage our control and our influence over goddess. All the while, she is still doing nature. She is still providing abundance. She is still providing pleasure. She is still providing food and fruit and, water and all that jazz. But we're busy making that be what we want it to be. And I know it sounds a little bit like foreboding, or maybe it sounds a little bit like dark or abysmal. but we're talking about on one level our identity development and how we come into our own. And then we are also talking about all of the things that we have done as human beings to make ourselves what we believe to be the master of the reality that we are currently in. We got prayers and spells for healing, and we've made some observations about the sun, and we teach that in schools, and what is taught in schools is dictated by law and order, right? Like, this is all the stuff that we have done to ourselves. And as we continue to take a look at the major arcana and maybe like the next couple of cards, it gives us some more insight into what we have done. And then when we take a look at it in the microcosm, we take a look at it and what we must do in order to grow and develop. And like, when we know the tarot, we know eventually it's satisfaction once we run the gamut all the way through, from Fool all the way back to the World. Like, we end up with satisfaction. However, it's some stuff along the way that, when we try to arrest control of nature, when we try to separate ourselves from nature or act like we don't have a nature in between us, we get different lessons. On that note, I would like to go ahead and check back in with our last sponsor. Check back in with our last sponsor. And it's going to be Uncle Don's Metaphysical Emporium.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Reverend Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Reverend Don's Metaphysical Crystals and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
Thank you, Uncle, for your sponsorship, of course. So we do have a few minutes left. I want to talk about what could be happening when the three of these cards show up in a reversed way. So a lot of folks might think or believe that when a card shows up reversed, that it is the opposite. And that can be true. But I really think, and I have come to find in my reading, that reversed meetings are a lot more subtle than just the opposite. And I do think that the deck has more clear ways of showing us the opposite meanings of some of these cards than, revealing it upside down. And one of the reasons that I do also think that is because you can still tell when opposite of abundance shows up, even if you don't have any of your cards upside down in your deck. When the Empress is upside down, it can be an indication that perhaps you are giving into some base nature, base instincts, maybe given into too much pleasure when it might be an appropriate time to insert some rationality. It might be a sign that you are engaging in pleasure seeking behaviors for the wrong reason, not because it's the sacrament like the goddess provided, but because you need to avoid something or you're trying to control some other feelings. So you're using it as an escape. Might be one of the reasons that the Empress appears upside down. Um, it could also literally be head over heels, and like that is a colloquial or like an idiom in American English, so that might not like translate everywhere where everyone's watching this. But head over heels means that you are not using your head in the best way. That you are walking in a direction that might not be consistent with what your brain or your reasonings would be like the best direction. There's a lot of pressure to be doing the right things, and there's a huge expectation to be doing the right things when you are the representation of law and order. And when you are not doing the right things, when you are in this position, the outcomes leads to an outpouring of corruptness. Because when you are the emperor, all the eyes are on you because you call in the shots, you call in the law. So everyone needs to be seeing you follow the law too. When the emperor presents itself as upside down, it could be that leadership is corrupt or changed in order to be more correct or more right for the entire empire. Also be an indication that there's some paranoia associated with the office of leadership. And that paranoia is leading to poor decision making that is being viewed by large amounts of the empire. It could be a sign that the current rule of law is inverted or not directed in the appropriate manner. And it could also be a sign that father figures or the father figure in question, depending on the reading, is not in their right state of mind as well. The thing about the emperor is that this is a position of power. It is a position of ultimate power, and ultimate power corrupts for sure, for sure. What is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is always on the brain when the emperor comes into play. And then finally, the Hierophant. When the Hierophant is reversed, it could be an indication that some of the lessons have been gotten wrong, that you're not in tune with your higher selves, that your road is ultimately blocked because those keys to heaven are now upside down. It could be a sign that you are around a teacher who is spiritually inappropriate, either for where you are in your path or where they are in their path, they're not in the right frame of mind. And so that leads to corrupted teachings or teachings that are interpreted through pain instead of healing, or interpretations that are interpreted through like pettiness or hurt or jealousy or some other virtue that has been flipped on it that has become a vice, because that is something that also runs the risk when you depart from nature and you move more towards homemade law and order and justice. Like virtues have a tendency to become vice and become interpreted in ways that are not necessary or appropriate for our incarnation. So hopefully you found this little discussion about the Holy Trinity, uh, as I like to call it. And I do like to interpret the major arcana in threes like this, and allow the relationships between them to illuminate their meanings. So hopefully you found this helpful. We're out of time for today, but thank everyone who did come on in and share some time with me. Love y'all lots, and I'll be back next Friday.